DFS. It is Friday, December 2nd here in Draft Shark Studios in Rochester, New York. Jared, I was reading old notes and I almost called it remote, even though I'm right here in my own basement. Welcome to our Week 13 DraftKings podcast. I'm your host, Matt Schaff, and eventually I figure things out. With me, as always, is Jared Small. And Jared, we're on DK. We're looking at QB first as usual, and I'm here to say happy Trevor Lawrence week.
Maybe. I haven't decided yet. Either Trevor Lawrence or Patrick Mahomes for me. And it's basically, it's funny. I was working on my cash lineup this morning. It's, do you want to play Mahomes with like the number 2 wide receivers in Jacksonville and LA, which would be, Josh Palmer and Zay Jones, or do you want to play Trevor Lawrence and get up to Keenan Allen and Christian Kirk? That's kind of where I'm at right now in my cash lineup. I definitely think Lawrence is a good play. I'll let you talk about him. And then, Mahomes, you don't need to say much. I want to get exposure to the Chiefs offense in this spot, a spot where we think the Bengals are going to push them, make Mahomes play for 4 quarters. We've talked about the Bengals pass defense not being good lately. And I don't think any other Chief is in play for cash. So I think, playing Mahomes, you just you soak up all that passing game.
You just want to play him because of baby swag, because he had his first kid this week.
Doesn't hurt.
Yeah, I'll be going into the 5K range as usual because I think Trevor Lawrence is just as good a bet for production, relative to their costs, of course. $5,900 is the salary for Trevor Lawrence this week. He beats the other 5K guys that you'll see in the lineup generator on both floor and ceiling. He's facing the Lions, the friendliest quarterback defense in the league, and Lawrence is just playing well right now. He's coming off his best passer rating of the season. He's coming off the first time all year he's had 3 straight passer ratings over 90. He's been over 100 in that category each of the past 3 games. First time this year he's gone 3 straight games without an interception. First time he's gone 3 straight games over 70% completions. He's coming off his 3 highest PFF passing grades of the year. And, that can often be matchup, but last week he faced a Baltimore defense that's been playing quite well lately. So Trevor Lawrence is playing the way that we hoped that he would play. Now he gets this prime matchup. And I mean, if anything, Travis Etienne is healthy, but if anything, the fact that he hurt that foot last week, should only further motivate the passing in this game, which is like the one question. And I don't think the Jaguars are even good enough. You can say, yeah, they're facing the Lions. What if they jump out to a big lead? Like, Jaguars haven't done anything this season to make us think they're going to jump out to a big lead. So I think we'll get a competitive game and plenty of room for Trevor Lawrence offense and points.
Yeah, Jacksonville open is the favorite in that game. The Lions are not favored by like a point and a half. It should be a tight, close, high-scoring game. If I'm going to play devil's advocate with the Lawrence thing, I will say the Lions are 13th in Football Outsiders pass defense DVOA over the past 5 weeks. If you look at the numbers, they're not great, but they're not as bad as they were early in the season.
Yeah, that's fine. I'll take that risk for my $5,900 golden boy. And I mean, he's a little bit less attractive for tournament lineups just because he's going to be popular, but I certainly think he's still in play there. I think that it's a week where we're going to see ownership spread around at quarterback because there are a lot of attractive plays this week.
Yeah, this is the most fun DFS slate of the season so far, I think. A ton of places to go. I probably will at least mess with the Lawrence tournament lineup, see how it shakes out. I mean, Lawrence and Christian Kirk, and then you could throw in Zay Jones or even Evan Ingram. It's super cheap. It helps you fit in a lot of these other high-priced studs we want to get to in good spots this week. I like Justin Herbert for tournaments. He's coming in at just 6% projected ownership, which I think would be a lot higher on other slates that didn't have so many good spots. Herbert coming off his best fantasy outing of the season last week, 28.8 DraftKings points. Then you have this Chargers-Raiders game with a 50.5 point over-under, super high, only 3rd highest on this main slate because, again, we have the Chiefs game, we have the Jags-Lions game that have higher over-unders right now. But the Raiders, 31st in adjusted fantasy points allowed to quarterbacks. They're 28th in Football Outsiders pass defense DVOA over the last 5 weeks. Herbert has 3 touchdowns in each of his last 3 games against Vegas. That includes 279 yards and 3 scores against them back in week 2 of this season.
It'd be nice when he gets Mike Williams back to extend that average target depth, but nice that he played well last week, so it's easier to count on him this week. And who would have guessed Jaguars-Lions up there 2nd in the league in game total this week? So that only further encourages us to play there. I also like Geno Smith and either or both of his receivers against the Rams this week. Rams have been a lot tougher against the run. We'll see how much that changes with Aaron Donald. But, I mean, Geno Smith and the receivers have just been easy to count on so far. And then
Mhm.
one other that I'm looking at is Jimmy Garoppolo at 5,300. He's certainly not in the same tier as the other quarterbacks we've talked about in terms of general upside. We saw the 1-4 touchdown game. Generally, he's more of a 2 touchdown guy, but maybe Christian McCaffrey's knee is a bit of an issue in this game. They just lost Elijah Mitchell. So there's Christian McCaffrey and then a bunch of, I'm not sure how good he is, running backs in the backfield. Maybe we get a little bit more passing volume from the 49ers in this matchup, especially if it ends up being a shootout. And that Jimmy G at 5,300 plus Brandon Ayuk at 6,100 is pretty good for salary. George Kittle at 5K. So there's still a lot that I think you can fit around those guys.
Yeah, the Niners-Dolphins game is super interesting. I could see it being a lower scoring game. I mean, the over-under, I think, is lower than I expected it to be. But I also could see it shooting out because I believe in both of those offenses. So, yeah, last guy I'm considering for tournaments is Justin Fields, who, if you go to our lineup generator right now, he's the worst value at quarterback. Now, we might end up bumping his projection a bit. He was a full go in Thursday's practice. So, that seemingly has him on track to play. We'll have to get confirmation on that. But I think he's going to be low owned coming off the injury. He's still $7,400. Like we said, there's a lot of other options this week. And the guy did put up 46 and 43 DraftKings points in 2 of his last 3 games. And we just saw the Packers have no answer for Jalen Hurts running the ball. Fields didn't have a big game rushing against Green Bay earlier this season, but that was kind of before the Bears unleashed him. So if I can get Fields at like 2% ownership, I think he's definitely worth a shot at tournaments.
Yeah, I agree with that. I had to go look up his price now because I didn't even get down to him. That's how far down he is in the lineup generator this week. But, we're looking for ultimate upside with these quarterbacks more than anything else, more than projected ownership, more than salary, whatever. We want that ultimate ceiling that if he just goes off, he can, not win the week by himself, but propel that lineup. And he's already displayed that. And the team has shown the willingness to make him the number 1 running back in any given game. We know that the Packers are playing the run poorly. We didn't really talk about Patrick Mahomes or Joe Burrow as tournament quarterbacks. I don't think you have to make the case for them. Do you have a strong lean between them, though, in this matchup where you can get some of the other guys' production by running back his, a pass catcher or 2?
Yeah, I prefer Mahomes. I mean, we have him as the better value, and he's coming in with lower ownership. I mean, the ownership's going to be close. We have Mahomes at 5%, Burrow at 8%. The other thing, too, and I'm going to talk about Joe Mixon as a tournament play, but if you go by Football Outsiders DVOA, the Chiefs have actually been tough against the pass lately and not tough against the run. So I like playing the Mixon side of the Bengals offense, just kind of hoping that, the touchdowns go his way.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think the other thing, there's $1,400 in salary difference between Mahomes and Joe Burrow, but Burrow's top 2 wideouts are T. Higgins at 72 and Jamar Chase at 79. So you're kind of giving back that value by playing Burrow because obviously you have to play at least one of those guys. And I think if you're playing multiple Burrow lineups, you got to have at least some that has both of those wideouts in it.
Both quarterbacks are kind of tough to know exactly who to stack with, right? I mean, I think they both have like 3 or 4 options you can choose from. But I'm with you. The Chiefs wide receivers are better values this week than the Bengals.
I do think that if you play Burrow, you have to play at least either Higgins or Chase, and maybe the sneakiest way to do it is put both of them in.
Yep, and I think if you play Mahomes, you got to play Travis Kelce.
Yeah, I agree with that. Juju Smith-Schuster, 5,700 is kind of the interesting guy to play from this matchup, whether you're playing either of those guys or, just looking to get a piece of it. Because I think his price is low enough that you're not saying he's definitely going to go off, but we do know from recent games that he still has that capability.
Yep. And I mean, there's some risk to Juju when he was limited last week coming off the concussion, but I mean, I don't think he's going to be limited again. And you kind of like that risk in tournaments. Like you said, it's going to keep the ownership off him a little bit.
Over to running back for cash, Josh Jacobs, Nick Chubb. Do we have to play one of those 2 guys this week? 79 for Josh Jacobs, 8K for Nick Chubb.
And this is such a tough week. Like, there's a lot of running backs I like for tournaments, but in cash, there's not a lot I feel good about. I actually might play 4 wide receivers in cash this week for the first time in a long time. Jacobs, I mean, it's an awesome spot. He's coming off a massive game, but he does have the calf thing, which scares me a little bit. And then Chubb, awesome spot. I'm going to have him in tournaments, but it's Nick Chubb. He's just not a cash game play to me because he does lose some work to Kareem Hunt. He doesn't do a whole lot in the passing game. So I think they're okay. They're definitely not musts in cash. The 2 guys I'm starting with, Aaron Jones, $6,900. I mean, yeah, he's in a committee with AJ Dillon, but he's been the leader for the majority of the season now. He's averaging 15.4 carries and 4.8 0 targets per game over his last 5. I think he's going to get at least that much work on Sunday against the Bears, who are just a pathetic defense all around. It's a game where the Packers should be able to go run heavy. So I like Aaron Jones at that price tag. And then I'm going to play Jaylen Warren. He's a must if Benny Snell ends up missing this game. Snell was added to Thursday's injury report with a knee. Even if Snell ends up playing, I'm probably going to go to Warren for the savings. I think worst case, we know he should handle most of the pass catching stuff out of this backfield. He was doing a lot of that even when Najee Harris was healthy. And then I think Warren's going to get like at least half of the running back carries, and there's definitely upside for more than that.
I think he's even more of a must if Benny Snell is active, because then some people are going to be scared off and the ownership rate's going to be down. Benny Snell sucks. I mean, he's been with the Steelers this is his 4th season, I think, with the team, and he has declined in usage every year. The Steelers clearly don't think much of him. The only reason he got used Monday night was because Jaylen Warren was already out and Najee Harris got hurt. So, we'll see what happens Sunday, but I'm not going in betting that they play Benny Snell over Jaylen Warren, other than to spell him here and there in case Jaylen Warren needs a rest. So I think that Jaylen Warren is, a savior at 4,900 this week, assuming Najee Harris is not playing. He missed practice Wednesday and Thursday, so we'll watch for confirmation Friday. But if Najee Harris is out, Warren's a must for me because he opens up a lot, regardless of how many lineups he's in. You can make the case against him for a tournament lineup because he would be highly owned at that salary as a starter against Atlanta. But cash, I think he's a near must. Travis Etienne would be a strong cash game play for me. I'm a little hesitant because of the foot. I can't say that he's totally out because Doug Peterson says he's good to go. Now, if he plays a full game and he really is good to go and he's, close to full strength, it should be a very good spot for him. I got to think there's at least some risk of a tweak and he leaves the game early. That would certainly hurt our cash lineups.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Like, there's a lot of running backs who are close to being excellent cash plays, but there's just like something there that's making me shy away from them. And I'd like to say Etienne's an awesome tournament play, but he's also coming in at 20% projected ownership. So I might end up fading him there too, which could kill me. But like, he could be limited with the foot, and then he could re-injure the foot during the game. So there's a lot of risk to play Etienne at 20%.
And I mean, there are enough running backs on the slate where I wouldn't bet on him being the running back you have to have. Certainly could be one of the top performing running backs this week. You mentioned Aaron Jones. I think one other guy in that Etienne range, David Montgomery, is $200 cheaper than Etienne. A little bit safer because he doesn't have a foot injury coming into the game, facing the Packers, who have been terrible against the run. So I think he's solid as a cash game play. Somebody that I would rather not play in a tournament lineup because I don't know that he has the ceiling. I would rather go ahead and chase Travis Etienne there. And then I think people are going to look at Dameon Pierce and think it's a good spot. 5,900, an excellent salary for him. The matchup is great. The Browns have been good to running backs. I can't get to him for a cash lineup, though, because of just how bad he and the Texans have been the past 2 weeks.
I couldn't believe when I saw his projected ownership at 16%. I kind of came into this thinking he'd be a nice tournament play at like 5% projected ownership because he's been so bad past couple of weeks. But I feel like people were playing Pierce for so long, like the last 2 months, people have been playing him in cash and he's been super popular in tournaments. They just can't get off him, I guess. So I can't get to Pierce in cash. And then if he's going to be at all popular, I'm going to fade him in tournaments too.
Yeah, I mean, he did so well for quite a stretch. And then one of the past 2 games was against Washington, which we knew would be a potentially negative matchup. So it's not hard to make the case in your head for him. Again, just the level of badness from the Texans the past 2 weeks has me probably fading Pierce this week, especially because I don't think that even if he turns it around, I don't think it's 150 yards and 2 touchdowns. So I'm not scared of what I'm missing by fading Pierce this week.
Yep, we've talked about that in previous shows. Like, even when he's been hitting, it's been hitting as a cash game play, scoring 20 points. Pierce has no performances where you had to have him to win a tournament.
Now, where I will be curious to see if he slides a little bit is in the DFS draft games. Like if I'm playing on Sleeper in the daily drafts this week, I'm curious to see where he goes, because if we get Dameon Pierce falling toward the bottom of those 8-round drafts, that's where I could see him, because he can give us enough from that range when we're not playing against a large field. So I'll check the ADP there and see if he can help me on that front. Turning to the tournament side on DK, Derrick Henry's rostered rate versus Nick Chubb has me interested. I want to see what it looks like into the weekend, because he's easy to overlook up there next to Nick Chubb, next to Josh Jacobs, and coming off 3 bad games of his own. But Philly's been a positive matchup for running backs. They allowed 5.35 yards per carry to Packers running backs last week. So if he does have a turnaround in him, this could be a turnaround spot for him.
So we have Henry projected for more ownership right now than Nick Chubb. 11% for Henry, 8 for Nick Chubb. Nick Chubb at 8% is my favorite tournament play at running back pretty easily. We talked about kind of the downside is he doesn't catch a lot of passes, and if he doesn't hit the 100-yard bonus and he doesn't score, he's going to hurt you. But man, he seems like a good bet to hit the 100-yard bonus and score at least once in this game. It's funny too that it looks like the Browns passing game is going to be more popular than the running game, and I get people are excited about Deshaun Watson's return. He could hit big. I think there's a lot of risk to him, in his first football game in 700 days. And Houston's not good against the pass, but they're better against the pass than they are against the run. We've seen teams go run heavy against them all season. The Browns, I think the Browns are going to remain a run leaning offense even with Deshaun Watson. They'll probably pass a bit more going forward than they did for the season so far. But I think in this matchup especially, they're going to stay run leaning. So I am super pumped to be able to play Nick Chubb in this matchup if he's going to be single digit owned.
I think Nick Chubb will always be under-owned on DK because people want to stay away from the receptions, which makes sense. He's more touchdown reliant than most other elite running backs. But this particular week, I mean, he's got 200-yard upside. We've already seen 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 running backs go for 140 plus yards on the ground against Houston, including the 219 and 2 touchdowns from Derrick Henry against them. Now, we know that Derrick Henry just he sees the Texans as a welcome mat, so maybe he's the only one capable of doing quite that against them. But if anybody else is capable of doing it, it's Nick Chubb. So I agree. I was pleased to see his low ownership rate. I'm curious to see if it sticks over the weekend. He's certainly in play. Travis Etienne, Aaron Jones, I think make plenty of sense on this side as well. Positive matchups for both. I'm a little bit less scared of the foot risk because I'm hoping that it brings ownership down. Like you said, The projection right now is a little high. We'll see maybe if that changes into the weekend or if you just want to take a shot on it. It might be better to play the Jaguars passing in that one, depending on what those rates look like as we get to Sunday morning.
Yeah, I'm happy to see Jones at just 13%. Aaron Jones, I'm definitely going to play him in tournaments of that ownership. I mentioned Joe Mixon before. He's projected a 11% ownership. We'll have to see about the concussion stuff. He was still limited on Thursday, so evidently he hasn't fully cleared yet. So we'll have to keep an eye on that. Some lower owned, cheaper plays. Cordero Patterson, I think, is super sneaky at 2% owned, $5,800, just because we saw his passing game role grow last week in the first game of the season without Kyle Pitts. Season high 62% route rate for CPAT in that game, tied a season high with 5 targets. If we can start getting 10 to 12 carries out of him, plus 5-6 targets per game, he becomes a lot more interesting, especially on DraftKings. I think both of the number 2 running backs in Green Bay and Cleveland are interesting for tournaments. AJ Dillon, Kareem Hunt. You can't project big volume out of them, but I think you can project more volume than they have been getting, and both should, at least on paper, be more efficient than they have been in recent weeks. And then I do think Zonovan Knight, we'll see his ownership. If it gets, if he gets popular, I think he's somebody you want to fade in tournaments. But if he stays in the single digits, with Michael Carter likely to miss this game, Knight just opens up a lot. He's $4,600, and I do think he's the best bet to definitely lead the Jets in carries, and he might lead the way in targets too. He had a decent pass catching resume kind of coming out of NC State. He caught 3 balls last week, basically matched Ty Johnson in routes. So it seems like the Jets are willing to use the rookie in the passing game.
Kareem Hunt's the only one in there that I would push back on because of his terrible usage, and because I think even if you use his salary as a reason to go after him, 4,800, I would just go ahead and I'd rather go ahead and play the $4,900 chalk on Jaylen Warren, just because I think the ceiling is so much higher on him against the Falcons.
Yeah, I mentioned it on yesterday's preview pod, but the one game Hunt got decent usage lately was that blowout win over the Bengals. He had 11 carries and 4 targets. That's kind of what you're hoping for if the Browns blow out the Texans on Sunday.
Yeah, and if that's the ceiling that you're hoping for, 11 carries and 4 targets, then I think that's another reason to look elsewhere. Wide receiver for cash. I like Amon-Ra St. Brown, 7,100 on a Trevor Lawrence team here, assuming that Trevor Lawrence is my cash quarterback. 7+ catches in 3 straight and 4 of his past 5 games. Played more than 70% of the snaps in 8 of his 10 games so far. 6+ receptions in 7 of those 8 games. So as long as he's healthy, he's a great bet for receptions. Not cheap this week, but I think you can fit him in, and he's at least as safe as any other wideouts that are up in that range of price.
Yeah, I think St. Brown is cheaper than he should be. I don't know. It seems it's been that way for most of the year on DraftKings. I think he should be, much closer to 8,000 with the volume he's been getting. This is obviously a great spot for him. So I'm definitely going to be playing St. Brown regardless of if I play Lawrence or Mahomes. I'm playing Garrett Wilson at 5,300 bucks. He's going to be super chalky, so he's an interesting tournament discussion. But I think you play him in cash at this price tag. He's going to be a guy. He's going to be in the 6Ks very quickly, I think. As long as the Jets don't go back to Zach Wilson, I don't expect them to. So, and then again, I'm going to play one of the Chargers wideouts, either Keenan Allen 6,500, Josh Palmer 5,600. The Raiders 24th in adjusted points allowed to wide receivers. They're 31st in Football Outsiders pass defense DVOA over the last 5 weeks. I think I prefer Allen slightly straight up, but I probably prefer Palmer at the savings, which again is another reason why I'm leaning towards Mahomes at quarterback. And then Christian Kirk and Zay Jones. I'm going to play one of those guys. And I prefer Kirk there. He's just been a steadier producer all season. But I do think Zay Jones at 4,900 bucks with the volume he's been getting all year. He hasn't delivered on that volume very often, but it's been pretty consistent and good matchup for both those guys, obviously, against the Lions.
Mm-hmm. On the tournament side, so what is your take on Garrett Wilson? Is there a level he needs to get to where you're going to pass on him?
I'm probably going to fade him generally, unless I have a lineup where I think is super contrarian anyways. And then you could, throw in Wilson as, one chalk piece in there. But, man, I love the player, but I still think the floor is kind of low just because I'm not totally buying in on Mike White. Like we talked about yesterday, I think one of these weeks he's gonna kind of implode, and maybe it's this week. So if it's gonna be Wilson, then what do we have him at 17%? Yeah, I do think he's a pretty good tournament fade.
Yeah, I agree with that because even though he's an excellent player, last week was great, and this week could very well be great for them as well. It's Mike White. It's a rookie wide receiver. They're on the road. It's absolutely no guarantee that they produce. So yeah, I agree that it's a good fade. I think that it's also a good week. I brought up the lineup generator on the screen here because you can sort by any of the categories in here. I think it's a good week at wide receiver to sort by ceiling points and kind of judge who you want to play from there. Because, you mentioned we mentioned it during quarterback, but I think it's really true at any position. There are lots of guys to like. There are lots of cases to be made. So I'm going to be chasing ceiling points here. And the guys that I highlight when I look at that, Amon-Ra St. Brown, T. Higgins, 5th and 6th. They're $600 cheaper than A.J. Brown at number 4. So there's some worthwhile savings in there. We're going to get high ownership on Amon-Ra St. Brown. So I think it matters what you build around him to make him make sense. Those two guys are also $1,600 plus cheaper in DK salary versus the top 3. So, you don't need to make a case for Devontae Adams, Justin Jefferson, Tyreek Hill, but the case against them, the relative case, is that savings for guys that are in a similar range of upside. So I, again, sort by that ceiling points, look at the guys around and figure out, the different alignments that you want to play at the position, I think.
Yeah, I'm on the guy that was 4th on that list, A.J. Brown at 5% projected ownership. But just, part of it is just instincts, as our guy Adam would call it. But I feel like we're kind of due for a big A.J. Brown game. We have seen, the way that Eagles have replaced Dallas Goedert is, 1, more Jalen Hurts design runs, but 2, just more targets to Devonta Smith and A.J. Brown. And Smith has honestly been the bigger beneficiary so far. He's had, 35% of the team's targets over the past couple of weeks. But that could easily flip, and we could get a 10 target A.J. Brown game. I also like him in this spot because where the Titans have particularly struggled is defending deep passes. Football Outsiders has them 32nd defending the deep ball, and A.J. Brown does lead the Eagles with 12 deep targets this season. I think he is the guy more likely to make that big play. So I'm going to take a shot on Brown that we get one of those big games like he had versus the Steelers about a month ago.
And if we want to take a drive down Narrative Street, we can look at
of course.
Revenge storyline here against the team that traded him away instead of paying him. I mean, I don't ever actually factor these things in, but AJ Brown actually, it seems like the kind of player that would be just looking to destroy his old team. He's got his best friend at quarterback. So, maybe there's a little bit of something this week. Again, I'm not going to let that drive strategy, but it's one of those things. If we're looking back on week 13 and AJ Brown blew up, it's like, of course he did his first game against the Titans with his best friend at quarterback.
Yeah, it's nice when the narrative matches up with the actual numbers too. It makes them easier to play. So I'm definitely in AJB this week. And then we've talked about Juju. I like him. I mean, definitely on Mahomes teams. I think he's a nice run back on your Burrow teams. I think you could even play Juju as a one-off at his projected ownership, $5,700. Like we said, limited in his first game back last week. The game before that, he was knocked out early with the concussion. The 3 games prior to that, though, 25, 28, and 19 DraftKings points. He was like really coming on, really looking more comfortable in this offense and with Patrick Mahomes. So I think if we get Juju back to full playing time this week, that he definitely has a bunch of upside in this matchup.
I agree. At tight end for cash, I wish this was Evan Ingram for me at $3,000 this week. The matchup's certainly good. The Lions are the 3rd best scoring matchup for tight ends on the season by our adjusted fantasy points allowed. I'm a little comfier though with Hayden Hurst at $3,500. Over the past 3 games, we have seen 7 targets and 5 receptions for Ingram, 17 targets and 13 catches over the same span for Hurst. I know that Jamar Chase is supposed to play in this game. Whether Jamar Chase has been on the field or not has not really impacted how much Hayden Hurst is involved, how many targets or catches he's getting. So I'm just going to bet on the better offense and the guy who's been getting the ball more lately. If that $500 makes a difference in the build, Ingram is fine because of that salary, but don't be surprised if he lets you down again.
Yes, I'm definitely with you on Hurst over Ingram. I'm trying to get up to Pat Freiermuth though in cash at $4,300, which is definitely more than I tend to pay at tight end in cash. But Fryer checks in as easily the top dollars per point value at tight end for us. Just 4 targets last week, but the route rate was still fine, 80%. He's averaging 7.8 targets per game over his last 5. All those coming with Kenny Pickett, 21% target share in those games, and the matchup's good. Atlanta is 27th in adjusted points allowed to tight ends.
It is kind of crazy to me to see that he's highest among tight ends in projected ownership for the week right now in the lineup generator. Obviously, he makes plenty of sense as a target play, but higher ownership projection than Travis Kelce heading into the weekend. Do you think that Freiermuth actually takes higher ownership than Travis Kelce in most large field tournaments this weekend?
I don't know. Kelsey's always tough because he's challenging to fit into lineups. So I'm not sure. I wouldn't be surprised if Freiermuth is. I think Freiermuth will be the most popular cash play. Whether that translates to tournaments, I'm not sure. I think you fade him in tournaments if he's anywhere close to the highest owned tight end. I don't love the upside on him just because of that Steelers offense hasn't been very good all year.
Yeah, I like the reception upside more than I do the scoring upside, but I agree. It certainly makes sense to fade him in a tournament. And only $700 more is George Kittle against the Dolphins, who have allowed the 4th most adjusted fantasy points to tight ends. And, like we said before, there's at least a maybe for why the 49ers might throw the ball a little bit more this week than usual. George Kittle doesn't need a case made for him. He just needs targets to come his way. He's still an excellent player. So tournament, especially, he's an attractive guy that can he's easy to lose in that range of, well, Freiermuth's right here and there's more savings. And then if I get up to there, I might as well go up here for Mark Andrews.
I'm not losing George Kittle. That's my guy this week. Hope everyone else loses him in that mix. It looks like they're gonna. He's projected at 4% ownership. He's also the cheapest he's been all season at 5K. So cheap, low owned, has the matchup. Miami 29th in adjusted points allowed to tight ends and 29th in Football Outsiders tight end coverage rankings. They're much higher ranked in Football Outsiders rankings against wide receivers. They're much higher ranked in adjusted fantasy points allowed to wide receivers. So now we've talked about Kyle Shanahan being one of the best offensive play callers in the NFL and attacking defenses' weaknesses. I do think this is a spot where Kittle should be featured in this game plan.
And for what it's worth, he does have a 2-touchdown game just a couple weeks ago, and all 4 of his touchdown catches this season have come since Christian McCaffrey joined the team. So we know that it's possible. It might not happen, but we know it's possible.
Yep. Exactly.
Anybody else at tight end?
Yeah, so I have Ingram down here as an option. But the more I think about this slate, like with Kelce, Andrews, and Kittle on it, it's like, what are the odds one of those guys doesn't blow up and end up being like the guy you need to have to win tournaments? So I'm really going to try to get one of those elite tight ends in all my tournament lineups this week.
Yeah, I think the way that you do play it is if obviously you play Evan Ingram, or if there's somebody else you like at 3K more, because you're paying for top shelf somewhere else. But that's what you need to find is top shelf somewhere else to make that one make sense.
Ingram to me is almost more attractive as a flex play, like in a Trevor Lawrence or Jared Goff lineup. Like just he's basically a minimum priced wide receiver if you consider him that and just play him at flex.
Yeah, he's $100 less than Sky Moore this week.
Exactly.
On defense, there's 4 in the 2K range among our top 5 in DK dollars per
Yeah.
point. I like Pittsburgh the best against Atlanta. It's been a neutral scoring matchup on the season, Atlanta against team defenses, but it's one of those low risk matchups. They've scored 17 points or fewer in 3 of the past 4 games. They've had 2 giveaways in 3 of the past 5. So Atlanta's a matchup that might not give you big fantasy points if they go run heavy, if they don't turn the ball over, if there aren't a ton of sacks because they throw the ball 15 times. But I'm not worried that I'm going to get a negative or like 1 point from this.
Yeah.
And there is some turnover upside to it.
Yeah, for sure. I keep going back and forth between the Steelers and Jets, who are priced exactly the same. I feel like I'm going to pick wrong, and that's going to be the difference between me cashing and not in cash this week. Hopefully that's not the case. Yeah, the Steelers, for all the reasons you mentioned, the Steelers D has scored 10 DraftKings points in 2 of the last 3 games with TJ Watt back. So they've been producing in fantasy as well. The Jets, though, I still think are the better defense. Slightly worse matchup for them, obviously, though, against the Vikings, who are much better offense than the Falcons are. It looks like Minnesota is going to be without their left tackle again, though. Christian Darrisaw has not practiced yet this week, so that definitely helps the matchup for the Jets.
And Cousins has had a little bit of turnover issues, not much though. He only has 1 multiple interception game this year, although it was recently at Buffalo. So, if you're choosing a defense like that, you're basically hoping for a big play turnover.
Exactly.
Any other defenses before we're out?
Yeah, so on the tournament side, I think the Niners are super sneaky. Again, I could see Miami putting up 30 points on Sunday. I could see them putting up 17 points and Tua taking a bunch of sacks because Miami's going to be without both of their offensive tackles. We know the Niners pass rush is one of the best in the league. They're getting Eric Armstead back this week too, right? Which helps the defense, obviously. So I like the Niners as a sneaky tournament play. And then I like the Packers too. Even if Fields is back. So Fields obviously has played a lot better lately. He's still taken 17 sacks over his last 5 games. So I do think there's still a bunch of sack upside to the Packers this week, and they're going to be low owned at $3,000.
I'd be scared to play San Francisco. I guess that's kind of the point of why you play them in a tournament lineup. But the Dolphins have scored 30 plus points in 4 straight games. Really, the only 2 times that they didn't reach 20 were the 2 games that Tua either left early or missed earlier. So I don't know. I'd be scared to play them, but I can understand the upside case, especially with those tackles out. And for a tournament defense, you're trying to take some chances and get something that nobody else has.
Yes, you want your tournament defense to not feel very good.
That's right. If it feels comfortable, then everybody's playing it.
Exactly.
That's going to do it for the Week 13 DraftKings podcast. Head over to DraftSharks.com now to play around with our lineup generator and build your own lineups on DraftKings, FanDuel, and Yahoo. You can also find Jared's articles highlighting top picks for cash and tournament entries on DraftKings this week. Hang around just for 10 seconds or so. We'll be doing our FanDuel show. For Jared Small and the rest of the Draft Sharks crew, I'm Matt Schaff saying thanks so much for swimming with us. It is Friday, December 2nd here in Draft Shark Studios in Rochester, New York. Welcome to our Week 13 FanDuel podcast. I'm your host, Matt Schaff. With me, as always, Jared Small. And Jared, I bet I know who you're playing a cash quarterback on FanDuel this week because it's a lot easier to make Patrick Mahomes, who leads our dollars per point at his $9,000 salary. It's a lot easier to make him fit.
For sure. And I do think Trevor Lawrence is still in play here on FanDuel at $7,500. Those 2 guys are the clear top 2 values at the position. But like you said, easier to fit Mahomes on FanDuel. Mahomes does check in as a better value on FanDuel, whereas on DraftKings, Lawrence is a bit better value. But yeah, I want exposure to the Chiefs in this spot. Game has a 53-point over-under. Chiefs have the highest implied total on the slate at 27.5 points. Mahomes has been awesome lately, even better lately than he was early in the season. And the Bengals pass defense, after starting the season strong, Cincinnati's 26th in Football Outsiders pass defense DVOA over the past 5 weeks. So it could really be a monster game for Mahomes on Sunday.
Yes, I agree. And you can play him in cash and not even bother playing any of his pass catchers if you don't want to spend up for Travis Kelce, because we know that Mahomes will put up numbers. We don't know this season as much as we have in previous seasons, just who those numbers will go to. So I think in cash in particular, where you obviously you're looking for big upside, but you don't need that ultimate ceiling game of guessing right on the receivers. He's attractive. 6 straight games of 320 plus passing yards for him. And like you said, that Bengals defense way down, not just down in pass D, 26th in DVOA since week 8, but also still decent against the run, middle of the league. So if anything, maybe there's further motivation for the Chiefs to throw the ball more, as we know they prefer to anyway. I agree Trevor Lawrence is in play if you're building out your lineup and you're like, I'd really just rather have more salary than have Mahomes on that QB line. Trevor Lawrence in play against the Lions. Geno Smith, I think, is also in play against the Rams. $7,600, $100 more than Trevor Lawrence. I mean, they're basically the same play. You don't have to worry too much about either one. Geno Smith has been steady for more of this season than Trevor Lawrence has, which I think would be the primary case for him.
Yeah, I think Geno probably a bit safer. I think you're giving up a little bit of upside with Geno over Trevor Lawrence, but I think they're both fine plays if you don't want to play Mahomes.
Tournament side, lots of attractive options this week, Jared. I think it's difficult to, whittle it down to one or two favorites for me at least.
Yeah, this is a week I wish I was good at the mass entry stuff where I could get a piece of all these guys and let the computer spit out lineups for me. But I suck at that. I stick to my single entry stuff. I like Justin Herbert on FanDuel here as well. I talked about him on the DraftKings show. He's actually our third best quarterback value on FanDuel. It's $8,100, projected for just 6% ownership though, and I think that's just because there are so many good options this week. Like I think everyone agrees Herbert's in a great spot against the Raiders, who have been, one of the worst pass defenses all season, especially lately. This game has a 50.5 point over under. And Herbert has 3 passing touchdowns in 3 straight games against Vegas now. That includes a 279-yard, 3 touchdown performance against the Raiders back in week 2 of this season.
Mm-hmm. And what's the line in that game at this point?
The Raiders are favored now, which
Really?
makes me want to bet the Chargers, but every time I bet the Chargers, they screw me over.
Yeah, I was asking because a lot of times we get those big game lines and it's because one team is favored by quite a bit over the other one. But this is one of those where it really has lots of shootout potential because both teams have plenty of talent on offense. Both teams not playing very well on defense. Both teams have experienced quarterbacks. So yeah, it's an attractive matchup to play really either side of it. Justin Herbert more attractive, but Derek Carr has been playing well lately as well and could be a pivot off of Josh Jacobs for tournament lineups. I think 7 of the top 8 quarterbacks in our dollars per point rankings make sense for tournament lineups here. And the one that I'm throwing out is Kenny Pickett. I'm absolutely not playing Kenny Pickett when there are so many other quarterbacks available. I think Derek Carr makes sense. He's not even among that top 8. Deshaun Watson to Tagovailoa makes sense here. So I think it's a really good week to spread it around. I usually try to narrow it down to 1 or 2 guys that I really like, but I think it's a good week to build different lineups. Even if you don't end up playing all of them, build out a whole bunch of different ones and just see what you like the most or see how many of them you can find spots for.
Yeah, the 2 cheaper guys I like for tournaments, Jimmy Garoppolo, who, admittedly, he only has 1 game this season over 19 FanDuel points. That was a 25-point outing against the Cardinals on Monday night a few weeks ago. But I think he has that 25-point upside again, especially in this spot, a game that could turn into a shootout against Miami. And Miami is 29th in adjusted points allowed to quarterbacks. The Niners have the 6th highest implied total on the main slate. And then I think Jared Goff is a little interesting to me. The Lions have the 3rd highest implied total on the main slate now at 26 points. Goff's problem has just been all the touchdowns are going to the running backs. Over the last 5 weeks, Goff has 6 passing scores. The running backs have combined for 9 rushing touchdowns, where, league average is like 2/3 of the touchdowns come through the air. So, and, the Lions are built to get the rushing touchdowns. It's obviously what they want to do in the red zone, but eventually, the touchdown luck's going to swing in Goff's favor. And it could happen this week because, as we've talked about, the Jags have been decent against the run lately, really bad against the pass. So if there's a spot for the Lions to throw it a bit more, this is definitely a matchup where they might do that.
Yeah, and decent meaning top half of the league in that category. So it's not like they're a little bit better against the run. They're a lot better in that area. We do have a 4 touchdown game from Jared Goff this season to look back on, so we don't have to totally project it. And he has been throwing the ball a lot more and for a lot more yardage when they lose. So, if the Jaguars do continue to play as well as they did the past 3 weeks, maybe they do build a lead and we get the Lions chasing in this one. So yeah, I like the case for Jared Goff. Trevor Lawrence sits as the highest projected owned quarterback on FanDuel in our lineup generator right now. I'll be surprised. Like, I won't be shocked if he is the highest owned. I'll be shocked, though, if he's well ahead of Patrick Mahomes, Joe Burrow,
Yeah.
Jalen Hurts, other guys in that range. Because, again, I think it's a week where it makes sense to spread it around. So I think it's also a week where I'm going to ignore who's tops in projected ownership, especially at quarterback, and just go ahead and play some Trevor Lawrence as well.
Yeah, I would guess Lawrence will be significantly higher owned on DraftKings, where he is a better value by our numbers. His salary, it's the savings are more useful than they're on FanDuel. So I think like if you really want to play Lawrence lineups, I think FanDuel is the better place to do it.
Over to running back for cash, Jared. Jalen Warren sticks out here even more.
Yep.
$5,000 against the Falcons, the number 7 matchup for RB scoring. The Steelers are up to 46% run over their 3 games since the bye. A big part of that has been that they've won 2 of the past 3 games. They've been over 50% run in each of those games. They were pass heavy in the loss to the Bengals in that same mix. I think this game will at least be close. I think there's potential for the Steelers to take a lead in it. So it should help rushing volume. And it looks like Najee Harris is more likely to miss this game than make it back for it.
Yeah, Harris looks like he's going to miss. Hasn't practiced yet this week. And then Benny Snell was added to the injury report on Thursday with a knee issue. He was limited in practice. So it seems like he got hurt on Thursday. So if he misses that game, I think Warren's an absolute must. I like Warren even if Snell ends up playing. The Steelers are 5th in rush offense DVOA over the past 5 weeks. So it's what's been a good rushing game, at least by Football Outsiders numbers, versus what's been a bad rushing defense all season. I'm going to play Aaron Jones in cash on FanDuel as well. Talked about him on DraftKings. He's actually a better value here on FanDuel at $7,400. Comes in as our second best value at running back. He's been getting steady volume. He's been awesome all season. The Bears' run defense has been bad all season, especially lately. So I think it's a big spot for the Packers running game. And then I also like Dalvin Cook in cash on FanDuel. The matchup isn't ideal against the Jets, pretty tough run defense, but Cook's just $7,600 and he is like, he's getting like top 5 usage right now. He's consistently been playing over 75% of the Vikings offensive snaps. If you throw out that blowout loss to the Cowboys where Cook was pulled early, he's averaging 17.2 carries and 4.6 targets per game over his last 5. So I just think he's way too cheap for the type of volume that we can project him for.
I agree that he's too cheap. I think he's going to be under-owned as well. I'm probably not playing him in cash because the Jets are tough on defense, and I could see him having a tough game here. So he's more of a tournament guy. So I like him overall this week, but I like him a little bit better for tournament use. He's coming off 2 straight single-digit games where I think it's going to keep his ownership projection down. But last week he had 22 carries and 5 targets. Like, I'll go ahead and bet on that, regardless of opponent. He's scored in 5 straight games before that 2-game down stretch. He topped 20 FanDuel points in 3 of those games. He is coming off of 4 straight negative scoring matchups. So that has helped keep the numbers down, especially the past 2 weeks. But, again, a week before that, he had a very good outing against a negative scoring matchup. So there's certainly potential for him to score against the Jets. I'll be interested to see how he does in this one. The Jets also, by the way, even though they're tough on running backs, much tougher on QB and wide receiver scoring so far this year.
Yep, exactly.
Elsewhere for cash, I wonder, Jared, is it possible to fit either Josh Jacobs or Nick Chubb in a Patrick Mahomes lineup?
I didn't try that. I just the price tags on Jacobs because of the calf, and then Chubb just because I don't think he has the best floor, especially at that price. I haven't tried messing with them in cash. I think they're both good plays. It's just the price tag here on FanDuel.
Yeah, I would rather try Chubb here because I'm worried less about the receptions. I'm not at all worried about Kareem Hunt. It's obviously just a touchdown or not, but I feel pretty good about Nick Chubb's chances of scoring at least once in this game and beating his season average in 91.5 rushing yards. I like Aaron Jones as well. I think it's a great matchup. I'm going to be curious to see where Aaron Jones comes up in daily draft, on sleeper, in the drafts on underdog this week. So if he slips, I think he has like tournament winning upside if you can get Aaron Jones after you've already taken 2 other players, for example. So if you haven't done any drafting, any DFS drafting on underdog or sleeper, you can use promo code DraftSharks. You can get your first deposit matched 100% on there. You can just click the link at the bottom of this. You don't have to worry about a promo code and it'll take you right there to do your depositing. On the tournament side, Jared, who else do you like?
Yeah, by the way, I've done 8 of the underdog battle royales so far this week, and I have 4 Aaron Jones. He's going like 4th or 5th round, so he's one of my favorite picks over on underdog. If $8,200 Christian McCaffrey is only going to be 12% owned, I'm going to play him. And there's obviously risk with the knee thing. He got back on the practice field Thursday and said his knee feels great. Maybe his volume has to be scaled back, but maybe his volume grows with no Elijah Mitchell. I don't know if Shanahan trusts these other backs. I think he trusts Tevin Coleman. I don't know if he trusts the two rookies. I mean, there's a chance that, in what should be a competitive game, that they end up feeding McCaffrey a lot more than he's been getting lately.
Tevin Coleman is like the guy that your dad still has to come over and fix things around the house. You're like, Dad, can you see how slow he's moving? Don't you know there are 100 other people within
he's reliable though
that do the same job? You're like, yeah, but I've been using Hank forever. I know Hank's going to do the job right. I like Hank. I'm going to keep Hank.
Perfect. Exactly.
All right. So have at it, Hank. I love the early ownership projection on Nick Chubb. We talked about it on DK. It's true on FanDuel as well. I would assume that he's higher owned on FanDuel, but if he's anywhere in single digits, I mean, Nick Chubb could be a weekend definer.
Yeah, the price tag is going to keep him low. And again, just the fact that there are a lot of strong running back options this week.
Joe Mixon also, last time I checked, 6% projected ownership on FanDuel, which to me is crazy. In this matchup where we want all the pieces, and he's not sneaky. Joe Mixon scored a bunch of points this year. Obviously, we're watching to make sure he's okay health-wise, come back from that concussion. But if he's active, he should be like one of your top RB considerations, I would think.
Yeah, I would guess his ownership climbs once he's fully cleared and we get confirmation that he's going to play, but maybe it doesn't, especially if that doesn't happen until like Sunday morning. So I definitely like the Mixon play as if you're not playing a Joe Burrow stack, whether it's Mahomes and Mixon as a run back or just Mixon as a one-off. I like him a lot. As I mentioned, Football Outsider says the Chiefs second in pass defense over the past 5 weeks and 25th against the run. So maybe it's more of a Mixon game. Alexander Knight here too on FanDuel, $5,800. Looks like Michael Carter is not going to play. We'll see exactly how the backfield split looks, but I think the Jets like this Knight kid. He was in the mix even before Carter went down last week. It looked like Knight basically stepped into the James Robinson role. Obviously ahead of James Robinson, who was a healthy scratch for that game. So I would not be surprised if you get 15, 20 touches out at Knight on Sunday.
I got to admit, that's 2 more times than I expected to hear Zonovan Knight mentioned on this stream.
Hope he stays sneaky.
Over to wide receiver for cash. The top 3 wideouts in our dollars per point are all in 8K range. You combine that with the salary for Patrick Mahomes, the salaries for Josh Jacobs, Nick Chubb. I mean, more than finding plays this week, it's deciding who to play among those guys. You can probably fit 2 from all of that group with somebody like Jaylen Warren to give you the extra salary space. And we'll certainly get to tight end in a few minutes, but you obviously can't play all of them. So there's some decision-making, especially on cash for tournaments. I think you can just mix and match all those guys.
Yeah, Devontae Adams is definitely my favorite expensive wide receiver. He does come in as the best value for us at the position at $8,600. Just the volume he's been getting is insane. There are a bunch of nice plays in the 6K range though. Devonta Smith, $6,800. He has 18 targets on a 34% target share over his last 2 games. He is on the injury report with a groin. He's been limited in practice so far this week, so we'll keep an eye on that. Like if he's listed questionable later today, I would get off him in cash. But assuming that's not an issue, I like him against a Titans defense that has honestly been good against the pass lately too, but they're still much tougher against the run. So you could get more passing volume out of the Eagles this weekend. I think Garrett Wilson is a strong play on FanDuel. We talked about him on DraftKings. He's $6,600 on FanDuel. Has really just been productive when Zach Wilson hasn't been under center for the Jets this season. And it's going to be Mike White again on Sunday. And then I think Josh Palmer is another nice salary saver. $6,600. Has a good matchup against Vegas. 7 targets for Palmer last week. Didn't have a big game, but decent volume. He's averaging 9.4 targets over his last 5 games, 8.5 targets over the last 2 games with Keenan Allen back. So I think he's still a good volume bet at this price tag and in a good matchup.
I'd throw in Brandon Ayuk to that group as well. We've got Debo dealing with a quad injury that limited him Wednesday, sat out Thursday's practice. So there's at least, I would bet that he'll play because he's been playing through it, but that adds a little bit of in-game risk to him, makes Brandon Ayuk the easier choice. Terry McLaurin is in that range. Juju Smith-Schuster is in that range. So I agree. You can kind of live in that 6K range. Start there at least and see what you might have room to pay up for, or just live there and pay up at running back, pay up at quarterback. I love Garrett Wilson as well. 28.6% target share last week in Mike White's first start, 8 targets too, where no other Jet had 3 targets. So, clearly Mike White came in and was like, dude, yeah, do you not see Garrett Wilson over there? He's kind of the guy right now. Let's just throw it to him. The Vikings don't rank better than 17th in coverage DVOA against any position, according to Football Outsiders. They rank 29th and 25th against the top 2 wideouts for their opponents. So it's a particularly good matchup for Garrett Wilson. I think Justin Jefferson might be the expensive guy that I fade this week. Obviously, Justin Jefferson can beat any matchup. He can have big points any week. So we're talking about splitting hairs if you're picking between him and Devontae Adams or him and a top running back. There's at least the chance that Sauce Gardner is a tougher matchup for Justin Jefferson. Maybe he gets targeted a little bit less than usual, maybe just a little bit less efficiency, but it's a week where I would be less inclined to play Jefferson.
Yeah, I'm with you there, which is scary, obviously, but I definitely prefer Devontae Adams straight up over Justin Jefferson this week, and you're even getting a $100 discount on Devontae Adams. I also like AJ Brown, who I talked about on the DraftKings show. I think he's actually a better value here on FanDuel at $8,100. He's our 5th best value at wide receiver, but coming in at just 6% projected ownership. Has been quiet the past couple of weeks, but I think we've seen throughout his career in Tennessee and then even in Philly this season that, he has the type of upside to be a tournament winner. And the Titans have especially struggled defending deep passes, which I think AJ Brown's still the best deep threat on this team. So I would not be surprised if he breaks a big play or 2 on Sunday.
I think Quez Watkins would have an argument with you about that.
Oh, come on. I mean, he's a deep threat, but he's not the best deep threat on that team.
Yeah, I'll give you that. Tournament side, Christian Kirk, I think certainly in play for cash because his targets have been great lately. He's not going to sneak up on anybody because this matchup's not sneaking up on anybody, but he's tied for 7th in projected ownership at wide receiver, which I think keeps him in play because Christian Kirk, I think, is in the mix to be one of the top scoring wide receivers overall for this week, just because of the way he's been used and because of the matchup. I think you can get a little bit sneakier. Obviously, you can play Trevor Lawrence and Christian Kirk and add another Jaguar to differentiate. You can be a little bit sneakier too, though, by playing Kirk, Amon-Ra St. Brown, who is also going to be highly owned, but Jared Goff with those guys. We talked about Jared Goff's case on DK. The biggest issue has been the touchdowns, just 6 TD passes over the past 7 games for him because they're letting the running backs take it in whenever possible. And by the running backs, I mean Jamal Williams. But we do have 2 games of 4 touchdown passes this year from Jared Goff. They were a while ago, but they did both happen this year. And one of them came in a game where Jamal Williams ran for 2 touchdowns. So if we do get a shootout here, as is being projected, there is room for both of those guys to score sometimes. The Jaguars D plays the run significantly better than it does the pass. So maybe that just stops the Jamal Williams plan, even if that's what they're trying to do. They just come up short and Jared Goff has to throw it to somebody. So we mentioned too, the game total is high, just 2 points behind Chiefs-Bengals, number 2 among all games this week.
The Lions offense is healthy now too. There were times this season where there were like 3 wide receivers and 2 running backs on their injury report. Now there's none, no running backs, no wide receivers on the injury report. So it's as healthy as the offense has been since the start of the season. So I do like the Lions as a tournament option. The last wide receiver I'll mention, Christian Watson. If he's going to be in the single digits in ownership, I'm going to take a shot on him in tournaments. I mean, you have the concerns with Aaron Rodgers injuries. Again, it should be a run-heavy game plan from Green Bay, but like the passing game should also be efficient against the Bears' pass defense, which isn't good. And Watson's just like built to be a tournament wide receiver, right? Like he's going to make big plays. He's going to score touchdowns. So the floor is low, but the ceiling is definitely high, and he's priced well at $6,500. And again, he's projected for just 7% ownership right now.
Yeah, he's Will Fuller with 2 hamstrings. Yep. I want to also mention Tyreek Hill and Jalen Waddle because it looks like they're headed for lower ownership than they really should. 9K for Tyreek Hill is going to hurt that a little bit. Jalen Waddle, 7,900, so easier to fit in. Hill's currently tied for 11th among wide receivers in projected ownership in this matchup where they're playing a defense that plays the run tougher than the pass. Waddle is at 5% right now. So it seems like, we talked about all of the plays that are available, so it's easy for guys to get lost, but I would try to make sure that I don't lose sight of these 2 who have already showed us in multiple occasions this season the ultimate ceiling that each of these guys is capable of. So if you can get either of them at lower ownership than usual, I mean, they could really be tournament winners.
Yeah, I mean, if you think the Dolphins have a reasonable chance to have a big game on offense this weekend, like you should be playing a lot of both the wide receivers as one-offs and also Tua stacks. Tua's coming in at 3% projected ownership. I'm worried about the Dolphins offense, but honestly, they're a good tournament play at the ownerships they're coming in at right now.
And even if you don't want to play Tua, playing one of these guys is a one-off, especially Jalen Waddle, because he is $1,100 cheaper. It just makes sense because wide receiver is the only position against which San Francisco has been a positive scoring matchup so far. So if they're going to get it done somewhere, it's probably going to be one of these two guys involved, and either Hill or Waddle could have a good game, even if it's a disappointing day overall for the Dolphins offense.
Yes, for sure.
Tight end for cash, Jared. Is it Pat Freiermuth?
It is, yeah. Travis Kelce at $8,400 is our top value. So you can try to get him in there. You definitely got to sacrifice at a few other spots. You save $2,500 going down to Pat Freiermuth, who has just been a steady target bet all year when he's been healthy. He's coming off a 4-target game, but that's more the outlier from what we've seen for most of the season. He has 7.8 targets per game over his last 5. He's third in expected fantasy points per game among tight ends over that span, and he has a good matchup against Atlanta. So I think the price tag is really good on Freiermuth this week.
I agree. Every time I open up the lineup generator and I see Patrick Mahomes at the top of the FanDuel values or Travis Kelce or Mark Andrews at the top of the tight end values, I'm like, come on, FanDuel, try a little harder with these things. Yeah. Like there's a guy who costs $8,400 at tight end should not be the top value. It doesn't mean you don't play him, but he shouldn't be the best dollars per point value. It's just, I don't know, weak pricing. But anyway, I do like Pat Freiermuth for all the reasons you said. I'm also okay with putting Pat Freiermuth and Jaylen Warren in the same cash lineup just because of the cost for the two guys. They're both sub 6K. So I'm paying for floor, not ceiling. Obviously, I hope for ceiling, but I'm paying for floor on these guys, figuring that they'll both do enough to get there and that they'll give me enough cap savings to buy those top shelf pieces at the other positions.
Yeah, for sure. Cost plus matchup, I think it's plenty viable to play both those Steelers in cash.
I think if you need that $900 or if you just don't want to play two Steelers and do want to have Jaylen Warren in there, Cole Kmet 5K, Gerald Everett 5,400, and Evan Ingram 4,800 are all similar options. I think that Freiermuth is comfortably ahead of all those guys in floor. He is comfortably ahead of them, all three, in FanDuel points per game for the season. But if the salary matters or, you just want to spend less there for whatever reason, then I think all three of those guys are in play.
Yeah, FanDuel just begging us to play Evan Ingram for $4,800.
I know. I look at him at the salary and I'm like, man, I want to like him, but I don't. GPP side, I'm kind of scared not to play Travis Kelce, Jared. And there's him, there's Mark Andrews. And then if I don't play them, it seems like maybe I should just go all the way down to either Cole Kmet or Evan Ingram because, when we're talking about tourney, there's certainly plenty of room for either Cole Kmet or Evan Ingram to get as many targets as Pat Freiermuth this week. And if I'm not paying all the way up for ceiling, why not go all the way down so that I can have at least some extra salary to spend on those top shelf options at the other positions?
About George Kittle.
You tell me.
That's my guy. That's my guy. And $6,200 on FanDuel. So he's actually our third best dollars per point value behind only Kelce and Freiermuth, but coming in at just 4% projected ownership. I know he's coming off a dud. He's actually dudded in 2 of his last 3. The game between that was the big game against the Cardinals. Kittle has 18 plus FanDuel points in 2 of his last 5 games. So he's still been showing us that ceiling. The floor is definitely lower than it is on Travis Kelce, even on Mark Andrews. But I'm not concerned about that in tournaments. I think he has not as much upside as Kelce. I think he has just as much upside as Mark Andrews, and he's significantly cheaper. He's going to be much less owned. So like I said on the DraftKings show, I'm really going to try to only play Kelce, Andrews, or Kittle in tournaments this week. Kittle's definitely my favorite, just the combination of price and ownership.
And I also like the idea of just having a 49ers player in the lineup. And I think that you need a little bit less from George Kittle than you do from the wide receivers, and certainly than you do from Christian McCaffrey, just relative to their salaries and their positions.
For sure.
Defense, the Falcons at 3,900 versus Kenny Pickett might be the most interesting to me among the 3K defenses. I want to like another 3K defense more. I just don't, though. And I'm kind of favoring the $4,200 Steelers against the Falcons as my starting point for the reasons I talked about on the DK show. But Atlanta has not been an awesome matchup for fantasy defenses, but it also hasn't been a bad one. So I don't think they're going to score a ton of points, and there will be some sack and turnover risk, especially when TJ Watt's involved.
Yeah, I don't like any of the 3K defenses. Now, like in cash or tournaments, if you get to a lineup you love and you have to play a 3K defense, I think it's fine.
Yes.
I'm going to try to get to the Jets in cash at $4,000. It's just a good defense. They're fourth in Football Outsiders defensive DVOA this season. They're also fourth among main slate defenses in FanDuel points per game. So they've been producing in fantasy. Not an ideal matchup on the road against Minnesota, but I mean, Kirk Cousins has some implosion potential. He's going to be missing his left tackle again. So I just think that the Jets are a good play at this price because there's a good defense.
Mm-hmm. I agree. Any other defenses you like?
Baltimore here on FanDuel, $4,500 against the Broncos. Broncos have the lowest implied total on the week, lower than the Rams with Bryce Perkins, lower than the Texans with Kyle Allen. And the Ravens D's been playing well lately. Football Outsiders has them third in DVOA over the past 5 weeks. And then I'll mention the 49ers again. I just think there's a wide range of outcomes on how this game's going to go against Miami. I would not be surprised if Miami's offense struggles against this talented defense without both of their tackles. So I think in tournaments, getting a defense as talented as the 49ers at low ownership is pretty interesting.
Yeah, at this point in the week, I'm always trying to find the cheapest defense that I actually feel good about playing. But once I actually build those lineups, it's certainly quite possible that there's enough to get up to the Ravens at 4,500, the Seahawks at 4,800 against the Rams. Those are probably the two that I would focus on in that range. And I think that's the way to do it in lineup building, not to say this is going to be my defense and then I'll figure out what's around it. You build everything else, you see what works. And like you said, if it has to be a 3K defense, pick one. I mean, any team could intercept a pass and run it in for a touchdown. All of a sudden, it's an amazing play.
Yep. Defense should always be your last spot in.
That's going to do it for this Week 13 FanDuel podcast. Head over to DraftSharks.com now. You can play around with the lineup generator. You can build your own lineups for FanDuel, for DraftKings, and for Yahoo. You can also find articles from our boy Kevin English highlighting top picks for cash and GPP play on FanDuel this week. For Jared Small and the rest of the Draft Sharks crew, I'm Matt Schaff saying thanks so much for swimming with us.